Thank you so much for agreeing to speak with me today, to share some of your experiences and your learning from your, 3 times round the world yachtsman and skipper, and some of the extreme challenges you've had to face in that time. And, I couldn't bear imagine what it was like. And just to find out with the toll it's taken on you and your crew. So I have a few questions I'd like to ask you if you could help to try and, I think it would really resonate well with our teams here at North Bristol Trust, who've been through an awful lot, as you know, in the NHS over the past year with the COVID pandemic. At North Bristol Trust, we pride ourselves on teamwork. Teamwork is a big thing in the NHS, and especially here at North Bristol. But many of our staff also have to work, single-handedly at very tough times, making tough decisions based on their training and their judgment. And you've single-handedly sailed around the world, as I mentioned, facing adversity in many times. So what learning, or what can you tell us, what did that teach you yourself, and how did it shape your personality?
Well, firstly, I have to say I'm in total awe of the NHS staff and all of what you've achieved in the last 12 months. Um, I'm a bit of a product I guess, the NHS, given that I've got a nursing mum and a GP dad, um, and my mum at the age of 78 is still nursing in residential care. I think in many ways, some of her personality types and so on have shaped, my own sort of destiny, really. Um, in terms of, you mentioned the single-handed sailing, and I've led a team around the world, as well as obviously sailing remotely single-handed around the world. Both experiences have taught me a huge amount about people, first and foremost, and the lengths that people go if they really truly believe in something. Single-handed sailing is a team sport. I mean, that sounds a strange thing to say. Most people think, of a remote sailor going off, facing the elements, and so on. But in fact, in many ways, it requires a team with an even greater sense of sort of intuition. Um, yeah, I sort of describe this as having the sort of gut feel to really sense what is needed at the right time to ensure that the sailor, in my case, or the whole team, can really thrive during difficult times. And of course, you're going to meet a lot of challenges along the way, which are going to really upset the team, but also upset the individual on the boat. Um, the really great teams and leaders, they really understand this. They rely a lot on their intuition, their gut instinct in moments of uncertainty. And of course, in situations like this, that it's not like we're practiced for this. And that means, even more so, you're kind of making decisions on the fly. But of course, in the world that I come from, we practice a lot for these type of scenarios. We practice day in, day out for in under sort of pressurized situations. And so we learn to kind of back our judgment and our instincts. And so I said, that's probably one, real sort of learning from this, is that we have to learn to kind of practice in real situations. Um, for me personally, um, I learned a lot about myself. I guess number one is not to fear isolation. Uh, Getting used to being alone and facing situations without, really others around you, helps to develop your own sort of personal resilience. Um, I think back again, I mentioned my mum at the beginning. She was somebody who very much, rolled up her sleeves, got on with things in those difficult times. Um, but also, she's someone who really taught me the importance of empathy. To be able to sort of put yourself around the people around you, to put yourself in their shoes. Uh, Especially important when leading remote teams. Sometimes it's good to show a real empathy. Um, Not all the time though, because sometimes you need a good kick up the backside occasionally, and that was certainly something in my own experience with the Vendée. I think if I'd had too much empathy, I would have, because I had a very difficult race. It was a very difficult challenge. I think I might have given up. Occasionally I needed a bit of a kick up the backside, and that generally used to come from my wife, Vicky, who said, it's not possible to be that hard out there. Think of my situation back here. Just get on with it and and get back. Um, I guess the final one I'd probably draw on is the importance of learning to reward yourself. We don't often do that. We're very good at rewarding others. We're very good at giving people a smile or a pat on the back, or um, but learning to kind of say to yourself, I did a good job today. That's really important. Uh, Competitive sports people often have sort of two sides. They have one sort of quite negative voice on their shoulder, and one perhaps positive, and often it's the negative voice that's really driving the ambition to succeed, the ambition to win. But sometimes you need to acknowledge there's a positive voice on the other shoulder, and listen out for that. And then particularly right now, where we are isolated, we are in these kind of strange times, we need to kind of listen to that positive voice as well.
Some really good, I love some of your comments there. I love the intuition and the gut feel, and rewarding yourself. That's so important for our staff to take those messages on board. So yeah, that works. So listen, you joined the Channel 4 recreation of the treacherous Bly's 4,000 miles round the world. I think it was Tonga to Timor when I read it. So what were the things that kept you and the team going? How did you keep your exhausted crew going? Because that's kind of what some of our folk are feeling like right now.
Yeah, it was fascinating to be asked to lead that recreation. Captain Bligh was a bit of a hero of mine in many ways. I mean, a remarkable navigator. But yeah, many people did question his leadership. Um, at sea, around that time, life is tough. It's very tough, with a lot of discipline and punishment. Leaders had, in general, very different sort of attributes. But Bligh wasn't he wasn't a great people person. That was pretty evident from reading his journals. Um, he succeeded in keeping his men alive. I mean, fundamentally, he got them all back safely. On our voyage, we were sort of setting out on a bit of a mission to test, to see if modern humans could face the same ordeal. Could they rise to the challenge in the same way as Bligh? Clearly, it was cast very differently. Not everyone was an experienced crew member like Bligh would have had. Most of my crew had never, in fact, sailed before. And when you're sort of all thrown in a boat together, in that sort of situation, you very quickly have to understand what makes people tick. Why are they there? What is their motivation? What skills can they bring to the table? And you've got to make a snap decision about the judgment of people in a survival situation. You've got to gain their trust. You've got to gain their commitment. So it's from that perspective, it's really interesting. I mean, the channel did a really good job at sort of keeping us all separated beforehand, and not you didn't get to know each other well. I think it's vitally important to get the culture right. At the moment there, you have a split second to sort of sit down with the team and say, how are we going to operate? What do we need to do to survive? Well, let's just take each day. We've got 4,000-mile journey across these different seas. The simplest thing is, if we sail this boat as fast as possible, we're going to get there sooner. So let's have a performance focus. Let's ensure that every day, we do things faster, better every day. And then, of course, in that environment, we were thrown into a little boat. We've all got to get this sort of sense of belonging. We've got to feel part of the crew. We're in one boat. We need to look after each other, and then you've got to paint the picture. And of course, this is very much the role that you'll have with your team. It's what is Timor like? What does the finish line look like? What are we going to feel like when we arrive in Timor in 40 or 50 days? Bly had a hero's welcome when he arrived. How good will it feel to finish this, to complete it? Keep that thought uppermost in your mind, because that's the thing that will probably make the difference to us surviving.
Yeah, no, I love your sense of belonging. That resonates well. So as I gave you the story earlier on, it's been a really challenging year for our staff with COVID. But you know what? Some of our staff have innovated like never before. They've done things that it would taken us years to do. So whenever the going's tough, people do think of being creative. So how have you applied the lessons that you've learned on some of your journeys? So when you come back to your everyday life, you don't just revert back to how it used to be and it's business as usual.
Yeah, I think we've got to see innovation as a constant thing, and learn and be comfortable adapting to change. We've got to again learn not to be scared of failure. I can think of certain industries where failure is really frowned upon. Who'd ever thought that the airline industry would be hit as badly as it has been, for example? Um, but it's so important that we learn to quickly get back on our feet. I'm not surprised that we can meet these challenges. These are often insurmountable challenges, but we do need to also learn from our mistakes, and not perhaps make the same errors. We also need to make sure that the young people around us, our families, our children, um, that they learn more resilience, particularly to look for the sort of positives in these situations. I'm concerned, like any parent, that after a period of isolation it's been hard for them, and we do need to equip them better, really, to meet the challenges ahead. For sure, we're not out of the woods in this regard, and I'm generally a little bit concerned that we're not doing enough to equip the next generation. Um, so I guess there'd be a couple of things. The other one I'd like to say is just we also need to learn from nature, and look at our world through a very different lens. When we put our lives more in balance with the natural world, we definitely become healthier, and more able to deal with change. And uh, you know, I sometimes feel that as a species we've got a little bit removed from the natural world, um, in our sort of day-to-day dealings. And um, you know when you're in one with the natural world, you're much healthier, you're much more resilient, and much more kind of capable of coping with change. And that, I think, is really something that's missing at the moment.
Yeah, and we very much stress the whole thing about well-being for our staff, and being able to rest and recover and renew and all of that stuff. So yeah, I resonate with that too.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. So listen, just finally, many of our staff are fatigued and do need the time to recover, as we said. But when you've experienced the highs and lows of a voyage, how do you pick yourself up for the next big adventure, and how do you then go on to build the next winning team to take you forward?
That's a great question. Um, there are a couple of elements here, and sport is a pretty good analogy, I think, for addressing them. I enjoyed listening to Pat Lamb's interview, and I thought he came out with some really really telling comments. Sports sometimes a good place to look. I mean, first of all, whenever you finish these big moments, be it winning the championship, or finishing a big adventure, there's always a sense of loss. Even when you achieve your goals, And that's partly because you've been through this fight, adrenaline surging, everyone's working together to get the job done. Um, and there can be a period afterwards where you feel a little bit lost, a little bit empty. We have a phrase called, sort of post-adventure blues. Luckily now I sort of recognize that, and in the past when I was younger, I didn't, recognize that, and I would sort of have this sort of slightly kind of, oh, God, what do I do to recreate that same feeling, that same buzz again? So it's really important to have people around you that can support you and support that sort of network around you. Um, uh, it's probably really important to also have something else to do, but obviously, you don't really want to recreate the same circumstances that we perhaps find ourselves in now. But that sense of, we got through this together is really important. I mentioned about the sense of belonging. Interestingly, with the Voyager mutiny, because we weren't really a group of people that had sort of been put together to achieve that challenge. It was more sort of a cast audience, different agendas, different reasons, led by Ant Middleton, who, had his own agenda and so on. It meant that there wasn't that sense of belonging. So very quickly that team, disappeared. And that's a real interesting telltale for me. If a team is going to endure for long periods of time, then you don't get that sort of disappearing act straight afterwards.
Well,
And
that's really interesting. Sorry to cut across you there, but for us, we had, there was all the adrenaline with the how to respond to COVID. It wasn't that it was an adrenaline where we all were celebrating. It was oh my word, we've all got through it. But now we've got the battle of dealing with all of the patients that we haven't been able to treat. And we've also had teams who are working in different teams and people covering different roles. So I kind of get what you're saying there. So that's really, really relevant. So thank you for referring to that.
Winning teams often don't naturally endure. It's unusual to have the Manchester Uniteds. Normally teams spend a couple of times at the top and then they very quickly fall to the bottom and so on. And unless there's a sort of a plan for succession, and I mean, it could be the event, the story, the adventure. It's bigger than the individual. And having a plan, that involves bringing on the next generation, training up the new staff, giving them the opportunity to really flourish in that difficult environment is critical. So I know that's probably a lot to think about, but in terms of your role, you're going to have to kind of think about and manage that change, because fatigue is tough. People need to be re-energized, but also there's another generation that need to be induced in some way to that experience, which is important as well.
Great, thank you. So we're going to be launching something very shortly in the organisation called The Big Conversation. It's about actually reaching out to people, because some people will want to get back and into the race very quickly. Others will take a bit more time. So that's really helpful to hear your story and learn of your experiences. So I'd like to say a huge thank you, Conrad. That's been tremendous and it's been really good talking with you. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I mean, I don't in any shape or form envy the pressure that you guys have been under, and I think for us to be able to sort of even think about the world that you exist in. I mean, I at the end of the day, I sort of think, all I've done is sail a boat around the world, but you've had to pick up a nation and get them well, keep them motivated and coming back and so on. And I don't envy your role at all, but I'm incredibly in awe of what you've all achieved.